Hi everyone, so as Nicola said, my name is Freya. I'm the digital curator at Cromarty Courthouse Museum, where I've been since August of last year. And I'm going to be talking to you today about my project, democratizing data, creating opportunities for remote digitization volunteers. And that is my fault for making such a long-winded title. So for anyone that doesn't know, just to introduce Cromarty Courthouse Museum, we are based in Cromarty, obviously, with a really varied collection spanning archaeology, social history, Fishertown life, Gallic history, architectural history as well as things like numismatics, legal history and military history. So the aim of this project was basically to digitize all of the museum's object records to create a publicly accessible online CMS on the platform that we use, which is eHive. As a fully digital project, or what was to be a fully digital project, it seemed to be the perfect way to engage new people with our collection. However, before starting out on this project, we wanted to make sure that these records, that this digital online CMS, was going to be useful for the people who would use it, for our audience. We wanted to make sure that it was representative of how different people engage with data, including things like their search habits and how they understand the collection. And this brought us to remote volunteering, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But to give you a little bit of background on where we were before we began this project, our collection's data and information was spread between several different sources, which was shared remotely online with our remote volunteers. The starting point we were working from was a very well-documented accessions register, so the physical accessions book, dating back to 1990, and approximately 400 records that had already been digitized on eHive, but had been categorized inconsistently. Other data sources that we made available to our volunteers were the Digital Museum of the Highlands and digitized objects on Smartify. We knew roughly that the collection had around 4,000 objects, but we didn't have a centralized database to store all of this information. So why did we decide to do remote volunteering to help with this project? There were two main reasons, really. So first of all, it would create a really nice opportunity for accessible work experience, because we're all aware that there are so many people who are trying to get into the sector, and this was a really nice way to share it with more people and to create a really meaningful opportunity to engage new people with Cromarty Courthouse Museum. And another thing I'm going to add to that, which I didn't write down, but this was a massive project with a lot of work, and I didn't want to do it on my own. So I thought, how can I get loads of people involved? And this seemed like a sensible way. But as well as that, we wanted to make sure that we provided an external perspective to the data categorization process. So by allowing different perspectives into this process, we knew that remote volunteering would help us to create a searchable CMS. That is a digital platform that reflects the thinking and the thought processes of different communities. If only one person is responsible for cataloguing and categorizing data, then the search results of your CMS will only be reflective of that one person's way of thinking. So by asking multiple, diverse, external stakeholders to take part, the data becomes more representative of a broad range of people, and that is democratizing data. So the concept of remote volunteering as well, it fosters transparency and accountability in the curation of museum data. With our volunteers helping to enrich and update digital collections, the process became more open and ensured that our digital collection was continuously improved and contributed to by a wider network. So this collaborative model encourages trust and public engagement in our cultural preservation. So I've got a slightly fuzzy screenshot there of the actual process that I used to sort of facilitate this project. So initially we recruited online. We put a little advert on Leicester Museum's jobs desk, which I'm sure everyone's very familiar with, to advertise this as a remote volunteering position. It turns out that there is not a lot of remote volunteering out there, so we received 67 applications from people keen to get involved. But due just to the physical quantity of data that we had, ended up working with 12 really, really great remote volunteers. I created a handbook which was sort of fundamental to the process of this project. that our remote volunteers could read and refer back to throughout the project. It contained all of the important information that they were going to need to work their way through the data, like the different data sources, so the places where they'd be looking for the information, the actual categories that they'd be choosing between to assign to different records, as well as how to navigate the data set they were using, troubleshooting information, and anything they might have needed. I'd be really happy to share this format with anybody if they're interested, so just let me know. So this is a really boring screenshot of the actual data sets that were assigned to people, and I appreciate that is very dull, but it gives you an idea of the kind of actual process of creating a project like this. Each of our 12 volunteers was assigned at least one data set, so just a spreadsheet really, of 50 objects. That was the object title and the collection number. I kept track of who was assigned what data using a sort of temporary CMS that we had going on an Excel spreadsheet. And the remote volunteers were tasked then with filling out 12 data fields for each of these objects. This included, and another possibly even more boring slide than the last there. So these fields included things like brief description, which encouraged volunteers to use the information that was made available by the name of the object where they could, to go ahead and do some of their own research to fill into that description and to flesh out the records, because this is one of the issues that we faced, was our records were very, very bare, I suppose, of information. Other fields that they were tasked with was grouping and identifying objects with collection type and classifications, as well as general information like the location, the item count, and any acquisition notes. We did also blank off some of the information from the accession registers that we shared with our volunteers to make sure that any sort of personal data was concealed from them. And then we added that in. As I received the data back, I added that back in. So it's sort of like a cross-referencing system there. Personal information from the accession records, so the details of the donor and things like that. So our volunteers were given 12 weeks to complete their data sets. If they completed one, they could come back and ask for another one. So some volunteers completed up to 4 data sets. Once they were completed, I collated everything into a primary spreadsheet, which totaled 1,239 records with 4,235 objects. So what was the outcome of this project? Well, our volunteers all successfully completed their data sets, and they made some really important and nuanced decisions about data categorization and descriptions. We created, through this project, the opportunity for our remote volunteers to build skills and confidence with digital collections management, and we hope this will really positively impact some people's professional and personal development, particularly if they wanted to get into the museum sector. This was a really genuine opportunity for participatory access into our collection. And as such, remote volunteering helped us to create an accessible, inclusive, and participatory project. This also encouraged volunteers from all over the country to contribute, which was really exciting, because a lot of these volunteers had never heard of Cromarty, or let alone our collection. And it was regardless of geographic, financial, or physical barriers to volunteering. By opening digitisation to remote volunteers, we sought to break down some of the power that's held by museums that act as these barriers to access. Ultimately, all of that digitised data was uploaded onto eHive, meaning we now have a publicly accessible CMS featuring every accessioned object currently in the Cromarty Courthouse collection, and you can see a lovely screenshot of our eHive page there with all of our objects listed. Following on from that, the project was really successful and it attracted a lot of attention. We were really delighted to not only have built connections with new volunteers and new audiences, but also to be awarded Highly Commended in the Collections Trust Awards of 2025 for this project. And then following on from that, the success of that project and having now a fully digitized CMS meant that we were able to offer a new in-house volunteer project, which invited 2 volunteers, both from university in Edinburgh and Glasgow, to come up to Cromarty for 2 weeks and learn about object digitization. So they were in charge of photographing different objects through the collection. And they gained a lot of really valuable skills in object photography, post-production editing, object handling, and digital asset management. The in-house volunteers were able to photograph, edit, and create images for 109 object records in just 2 weeks, which are all accompanying now the digitized records on eHive. And this was as a result of that data categorization undertaken by remote volunteers. And what's next? On to the next thing with new projects all the time. So we're currently running a Young Curators program. This offers opportunities for both people to come into the museum space and to get involved remotely to curate temporary displays and mini exhibitions inside the museum. Using the CMS created from the data of the remote volunteers all helps us to do this so that people can access our objects and learn about our collections from afar. But data digitization is never really done. As our collections grow and we dig deeper into different areas of the collection, we can use this same remote volunteering format in new projects to collaborate with our community, to champion external voices, and to become even more representative and inclusive spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Freya. Any questions for Freya?
Where's my funding from, Ailey? HIE and MGS.
Just interested in how you managed the recruitment process from the 67 expressions of interest to the 12 recruits, and just a little bit more about how that happened.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I definitely wasn't expecting quite so many people to get in touch, which was a sort of indicator of the sector as well, a little bit, about how many people are so keen to get that practical experience in the museum. So we wanted to bring on as many people as possible. I basically just asked for a few lines, a paragraph, an attached letter about why they were interested. So it wasn't so much, I didn't want it to feel like a job application. I didn't want to do formal interviews. I didn't want to ask for people's CVs. I just wanted to hear a little bit about, I gave some prompting questions and said, if you could just let me know why you're interested, what the collection, what might interest you in particular about the collection, and how might you use the experience sort of moving forwards. I wanted to keep it really, really casual and accessible, because I really resent volunteering opportunities that are treated like job roles. I just wanted to give some people an opportunity to get stuck in, really. And then from there, I sort of selected 12 volunteers, and I just got in touch to let them know if they still wanted to be involved, and they could. I didn't do any interviewing for that particular one or any kind of chat, because it was just a project to get people involved into, as long as they had the skills and the interest, I was sort of happy to bring them on board. So I wanted to keep it really accessible from that perspective. But yeah, there was a lot of filtering out to do because there was a lot of applications, so not complaining at all. But it was good to have that reference of just why they're interested, and I could sort of order people a little bit by that, I suppose.
And Freya, did you look at the diversity of that group when you were looking at it?
No, not specifically, actually. I think that is certainly one thing that you could do, but capturing that information, initially I was opening this up on like a first-come, first-served basis, but because it got so popular, I started looking more in depth at the reasons and motivations and how it would best serve people to be involved. But I didn't capture that data particularly. I did know sort of roughly where people had come from, so I knew the geographical spread of volunteers, but I didn't capture anything more specific than that, but certainly could feed that into projects moving forwards to make sure that it was as representative, I suppose, and inclusive as possible. Thanks, Dan.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Did you end up having many volunteers from the local area, like from the Black Isle, Easter Rossway, or was it actually people much further afield?
They were pretty much all further afield. I'm aware that there was one slightly more local volunteer, as in like Black Isle or Inverness location. But apart from that, everyone was from everywhere else. Yeah, which was exciting.
Just asking, where did you advertise for your volunteers?
It was the Leicester Museum's job desk. So it's usually a platform for jobs, but they do advertise sort of like trustee roles, volunteering positions as well. And I think generally everybody kind of is broadly aware of that as a space, so it seemed like quite a good place. I was going to put it out wider, but we got so much attention from that one platform that I was like, no more. At the end, no, it was good.
Great, thank you, Freya.